Hey everyone, John here, and welcome back to part 2 of this exploration of glitchy text looks using Sapphire Shake inside of Sapphire Builder. In part 1, we took a look at how to create a more subtle look, but this time I'm going to break down a look I further developed using more Sapphire effects for a more glitchy sort of text reveal. So go ahead, download the project file, and let's jump in. So I've already got a RAM preview here in After Effects, and you can see this is definitely a lot glitchier. We're still using that sort of twitchy separation, the RGB randomness, and we've got the grid in there, but there's a whole lot more going on in here. You can see there's a larger list of effects, including things like PixelMosh, Tile Scramble, Distort, and also Invert. So let's click on Edit Effect, go into Sapphire Builder, and break this down. All right, so first is PixelMosh. Now, I've already done a couple of tutorials on how to use the AltFlowData source settings with PixelMosh, so definitely check those out. But for now, just to let you know that I've used it the same way as I have in those tutorials by creating a map, which we'll look at in a sec, and plugging that into the AltFlowData source port. So you can see here, I've already selected the host settings I'm going to view in the host. And these are all the ones that are affecting the AltFlowData source just in here. You can see none of these other ones are turned on. And if we just move to a frame where we can see what's going on with this, I'll just do a little preview. There we go. So we've got it really breaking up. I love the way that PixelMosh can be used to tear up type. It looks fantastic. So before we move on to the next effect, which is Shake, let's take a look at this map. So we're starting with a black color, just S color. We've got, again, digital damage. And if you've watched the previous tutorial, you'll see how I use digital damage. And that's also a great effect for breaking text up like this, specifically using it as a map. Now, beneath that, we have Warp Transform. And you can see here I've only got the rotate setting turned on. And also you can see that I've actually made that a driver, okay? Because that's driving the rotation for the grid and also parallax strips. And we looked at that in the previous tutorial. So you can see I can rotate that. Parallax strips, you can see angle is connected to Warp Transform. And if you're ever wondering, oh, well, how do I know what that's connected to? Just click on the link and click on View Driver Node. See, that selects Warp Transform and that shows you that's the one that's driving it. Okay? So parallax strips, again, the same as in the previous tutorial, very fine horizontal strips there. And below that we have Invert. So I've just inverted that, and you'll see why in a moment when we look at cutout. Okay. So we can come back to Shake now. So as in the previous tutorial, this is the overall shake. So it's shaking all of the text. But it's after PixelMosh. And importantly, you can see we have the Twitchy setting. And remember from the previous tutorial, I used the Twitchy setting because I didn't want it shaking all the time. And this is a great setting to use to just have, it twitching occasionally. And you can adjust that by adjusting these settings here. And you can also see that I've made those available in the host, including Shake Seed as well. So beneath that, we have Tile Scramble. And Tile Scramble is being used to break the text up. So if I just increase the distance, you can see that breaks it all up. And this is an important part of the transition that I created. We'll look at that in a moment. I'll just reset that for a sec. Beneath that, we have Distort, just to add a little bit more detail and interest. So plugged in to Distort, we have parallax strips, but only up to the parallax strips, not the invert, because I wanted to use it in this form, not in the inverted form. And I've plugged that into the lens of Distort and also the matte of Distort. So we're matting out the result of the distortion. So if I just select that, and if I'm just going to increase that so you can see it a little more easily, I'm going to just bring up the amount. And you can see how that's using the parallax strips or the effects up to parallax strips to distort You can see all these lines that it's creating. It's going to distort that to give it that kind of look. So it's a lens distortion. I didn't want it too strong, but I wanted it because it added a little more detail and interest. So I'm just going to reset that back to 1. I'm not sure actually, what did I have it at before? 0.74. Okay. Now beneath that we have the second shake. Remember we used 2 shakes in the previous tutorial? And again, I've linked this one to the first shake. And we've got the Twitchy setting, and I've linked those parameters here. You can see that they're red. And again, I've left amplitude unlinked because I wanted to have this separate to be able to control this separately. And also under channels, you can see that RGB randomness is checked and increased slightly. So we get a little bit of the separation, the channel separation. And as in the previous tutorial, I'm also using the map to mask out the secondary shake. So we're only seeing that separation, that channel separation in less areas of the text, not over the whole text. Now, one thing I've also done is I've actually linked the Y random amplitude and the X random amplitude, because you can see here, this is linked actually to shake 1, and we've got some Y shake here. The random amplitude is 0.5, but X is turned off, it's 0. So we're only getting shake like this, which is really nice. Sometimes I only want my text to shake left to right or up and down. I think that works particularly well with text. Now beneath shake 2, we have the cutout effect. It's very simple. And all that's doing is it's taking the inverted version of this map and it's cutting it out. You can see I've plugged that into the matte port. And if we come back to shake 2, that's what we've got there. But here, by using all of this as a matte, I'm just cutting some of it away. If I plug that from here into my matte, that's going to cut too much away. Okay, so that's why I inverted it. So all that's doing is it's just cutting a little bit more away and just making it a little more interesting, a little more detailed. That's the reason I did that. And below that we have invert 2. And at the moment this is doing nothing. All I've done is checked invert luma, because back in After Effects or in the host, we're going to animate the luma so this switches from white and black to black and white. Okay, so it inverts, all right? Beneath invert 2, we have Sapphire layer, and you can see everything up until invert 2 is connected to the background port. And we have Sapphire grid connected to the foreground port, but there's other effects connected to that. So come up to the source, that's the start of that section. And that's plugged into the mask port of digital damage. So that's masking out digital damage. See that? And digital damage is masking out Sapphire grid. So we get that effect. So we're stacking up the masks there. Now the reason I use the source as the mask for digital damage is because I didn't want that much grid. You could do that, definitely. But I wanted it to be more, controlled by where the text was, or whatever layer you decided to use with this effect, because remember you can switch it out in the host. So that going into grid and that into Sapphire layer gives us this look. Nice, right? And we used grid in the previous tutorial, and it kind of looks like a wireframe, like the base of what this text is made out of. Often when they create, they lay concrete, they put reinforcement in it, and that's what it kind of looks like. Now, to control whether you can see the grid in the host, you can see I've checked grid opacity. So taking that down to 0 will turn the grid off. And I just want to show you something. If I click on digital damage grid, you can see how we've got this little yellow triangle. What that's saying is that we've exhausted the amount of parameters we can see in the host. So I was thinking at first when I set this up that maybe I don't need to see digital damage for the grid in the host. But come to think of it, I think it's going to be more flexible if we can have digital damage in the host and just turn off the grid. Obviously, I'd like to have both, but there's a limitation at the moment. So what I can do is click on the top here to turn them all back on for grid, and then turn them all off, okay? And click on digital damage grid. Now they become available So if I come into block noise details, I want to adjust the block's threshold in the host because that will give me, you know, more or less grid. If I bring that up, I'm going to decrease the amount of grid, and I'll turn that on. And I also want to turn on the intensity as well, because just making sure that if I bring that to 0, we definitely won't see any grid. Okay, so now I've got these available in the host, and I don't have the grid settings available in the host, but I think this is going to be more flexible. Okay, so why don't we now go back into After Effects and set some keyframes and create the animation. I'll just click OK. And I haven't got any keyframes yet, so that's all fine. So you definitely want to settle this up before you set keyframes. And there we go, looking really nice. So if we have a look at the timeline, you can see there's a couple of examples below, finished B and finished A. I just was experimenting and I thought those look quite good, so I thought I wanted to share those with you. You can take a look at those. But let's set this up. So the main thing to create the text forming is using tile scramble. So let's twirl open tile scramble, and we'll just move the time indicator to where we want the text to be fully formed, maybe, I don't know, 15 frames. And we'll set keyframes for scramble distance, Z distance, or Z dist, and scramble seed, okay? Hit the U key, and I'm going to select those, right click, and choose toggle hold keyframe. Because we don't want to interpolate between the keyframes. We want it to jump around. So now we'll come right back to the beginning, and we will increase the scramble distance. And watch what this does. It will scramble the text out like that. Boom. Now we're still getting a fair bit of grid there, but of course we can control that because we've made these digital damage grid properties available. So if I just bring that up, we'll see less. And of course I could animate that as well. All right, so I'm going to make that one a hold keyframe as well. Now I'm going to hold down Control and Alt on the PC. That'd be Command and Option on the Mac. It's been a long time since I've used a Mac. And just make that a hold keyframe. And I'm going to adjust the Z dist. So if I bring that down, that's going to push the text outwards, okay, on Z, and just make it bigger. It will go a little bit softer, but that's okay. I can deal with that. So that's a pretty good first keyframe. I'm going to make that a hold keyframe too, and I'm just going to set a keyframe for scramble seed. So now that I've got that, I can just move in time a little bit, hold that for a few frames, and just try changing the seed. Just drag the seed value. And if I really want to fine-tune the seed, I can just select it, hold down Control or Command, and just use the up arrow key. Something like that looks pretty good. So now I'll drag again and change the seed again. Just trying to distribute it around the frame a little bit. Now I've just shifted that away from the correct position, so I'm just going to reset that. Hit U again, just to show those keyframes. And what I can also do is adjust the Z dist. Don't want to take it too far, otherwise we won't be able to see the text at all. So something like that. That'll jump around. And if we come back to there, it's fully formed. So let's just preview that. So it'll jump around the frame and it will form like that. Okay. Just see if I can fine tune that a little bit more. But that's the basic idea, right? You just keep dialing that in until you get the look that you like. Now, at this point here, I want it to be glitchy for a moment, maybe jump around a little bit, but then I want it to not be glitchy anymore. So I have to adjust my digital damage main. So that would be blocks intensity. Just bring that back to 0 and no damage. Okay, so I'll click on the stopwatch. Press U to isolate that. Bring that back to the beginning because I want the damage. And here I'll just bring that down to 0. I probably could have used blocks intensity for digital damage grid too, but intensity does the same thing. It's just an overall intensity for all of the damage options. Right, so now we get this look. Let's have a look. It jumps around a bit and forms. Now what I often like to do is I like to sort of bring the glitchiness back a little bit for a moment. So have it hold. You can see we've got a nice little bit of twitchiness there on the Y, because we've isolated it to the Y. Not too much, just a touch. So come back to here, and let's just bring up that block's intensity again. We just add a bit of glitch back in, and then we just move forward a little bit, and then we bring it back down to 0. So now it'll fully form, and then it'll have another little glitch like that. Now we're also getting the twitch continuing, which is not ideal, but I kind of like it to twitch there, the twitch, and then maybe stop with our twitchiness there. So that will be our shake 1, right? So that would be our amplitude. So we'll set that, make that a hold keyframe. We like it at the beginning. That's all looking good. And we can always play with the random seed, remember? If we, want to sort of make a variation, or just once we've set these keyframes, try different looks by changing the seed or different variations of the look. So I like that there, but at this point I want it to stop. So I'll bring that down to 0. So now it comes back fully formed, and it shouldn't be doing anything else now. Perfectly formed. Let's take a look. Nice. A little glitch. It could look good if it's got that bit of glitch there, and then maybe another little bit of glitch there. So blocks intensity, bring it up a little bit. Ooh, just like that. And then back down to 0. You see, by isolating only the parameters that we want to see in the host, I can zero in on exactly the things that I knew I wanted to animate really quickly. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, looking good. I like that. So now what we can do is take a look at how we could use the... So now what we can do is use our invert. All we have is invert luma. So I want to invert this at certain points just to make it more interesting. So at the beginning, I'll set a keyframe. Hit U, just to reveal that. That's already going to be a hold keyframe because that's the nature of this particular parameter. Come to that second random seed and turn it on. So we get that. So we start like that, and then we flash to that, and then on the next one, we'll turn it off. There we go, flash to there, and then off. Might leave it off for a moment. And then when we come to this one, maybe we'll turn it back on again. It would be nice there maybe to have a little bit of glitch. So what I'll do is I'll just bring that one to there and increase the block's intensity a little bit, just like that. Maybe a bit more like that. 1, 2, and then off again. 0, and then off again like that. So we hold a bit. And you could add a little bit more at the end. Maybe I just want that inversion at the beginning. Let's take a look at that. Now, does that extra little flash look any good? I don't know. Maybe it's too fast. So it changes to there. Maybe I need to bring it back a bit. Now it's a bit boring, right? No, it just holds too much. No, I'm not going to have that there, so I'm going to leave that off there. I don't like that. I don't think that looks pretty good. I think it looks much better at the beginning. Just when it's revealing. So we flash on, off. I think it probably holds for a little too long too. And this is what it's all about. Setting keyframes, zeroing in on just the right look. I'm going to bring that back. Come and change my scramble seed. Maybe my scramble distance, bring that back. Add a bit more into the frame. Like that. That's looking a little bit better. I still think it holds for way too long. I think it can be a little bit more edgy at the beginning. That's more interesting. I like that. You could put another sort of random seed in there, or a couple more keyframes in there. Let's take a look at how the whole thing looks. Nice. I think that's looking really good. And of course, once you've got your basic look set up, you can go ahead and duplicate the layer and play around with some of the other parameters. So let's try that. So I'll just twirl that close, duplicate by pressing Shift D. And just going to turn that one off. All right, so let's take a look at this. Let's play around with some of the other settings. We have the warp transform, and I linked the parallax strips and the grid to the warp transform, and the warp transform is also rotating digital damage. So what we can do is just rotate that. Let's just say 45 degrees. And now we've got everything rotated to 45, which is interesting. We can also play around with the digital damage main seed. And notice I've named it other seeds because I've linked a bunch of seeds together. So I'll just drag that. And it's not keyframes. So now this also isn't changing the tile scramble. It's just changing everything that's part of that digital damage map. So we can also hit the U key, and I might want to just muck around with the scramble seed a little bit more. Just try different looks. Like that, a bit of a preview. So it's changing it up a little bit more. And what about Shake 2? Shake 2 has its own amplitude. So maybe I want to introduce a little bit more of that separation, that RGB separation. So, bring up the RGB randomness. So we can give it a bit more. Now increase the amplitude, change the seed. So we can change up that look as well. So we can fine tune. Now we've got more color, more separation. Probably holding for a little too long there, right? So maybe just change that scramble seed and maybe bring it down a little bit as far as scramble distance. Can actually go into a negative territory there, which is interesting. And that's quite nice because we can bring our Z disk down really low and we get these big blocks. Probably holding a little too long there, so maybe just bring that back there. You can add as much chaos as you want, really. Change the seed. Change the Z disk. Like that. Okay. And maybe flash it to white again. It's so easy to do. And flash it off. Go quick to preview and, very quick to experiment. All right, so hopefully that's given you some ideas about how you can take single Sapphire effects like Sapphire Shake and enhance them quite dramatically using Sapphire Effect Builder. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. If you'd like me to dive deeper into any of what you've seen, also leave a comment. If you'd like to learn more about Sapphire or download a trial version, visit borisfx.com. For now, this is John. I'll see you in the next tutorial.